the key? Where's the key? Give me a key card. I don't see a key card. No. No key card. Oh my god, he's so heavy though. Fuck, no key card. No. It still worked. Let's see how big this dude is though. M4, there's the M4 guy. We're gonna go ahead and shut that. Oh my god, 67. Oh no. Oh no, 68. Jesus Christ, they are not gonna be happy. We may even know these people, I don't know. Sorry guys. Jesus Christ. Shit. Let's do that. Will that fit? Yeah, that fits. Do this. Boom. I like that idea. Boom, boom, boom. Take that. We're gonna be hefty though. Get rid of that. Take this mask. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, now we're maxed out. Now we're juiced. Happy? We're happy with this? Level 6, baby. Hold on. I heard jumping. I think there's somebody here. Yes. I'm dead. Oh! He checked! He checked! You! Who are you? Pocket pounder? Alright, time to open this ourselves. Give me that red key card. Did I take this fucking sim or what? Why are you still fucking crying? There we go. Propane. Wasted. What a waste. Actual waste. Ooh, here we go, here we go. Yes, 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 yes. Focus up, focus up. He's up here.
Oh, my mama. I'll bring the light back. Do a scav run and hop in the shower.
Oh, there's nothing like going from Kappa. Am I right? Now I know there's a lot of ways to play Tarkov. Well, there's only two ways really. It's either PvP or PvE. As you can tell by my channel, I am that PvE guy. Is it a skill issue? Yes. Yes it is, 100%. To spice things up in PvE, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go into more of a hardcore mode, if you will. Now what's not helping is that I don't
So you may not know this about me, but my youthful visage doesn't lie. I am, in fact, a Zoomer. And being a Zoomer means that I'm a little bit of a gamer. I grew up playing video games, and I still consume
that him?
content games. Even though I grew up Zoomer. And being a Zoomer means that I'm a little bit of a gamer. I grew up playing video games, and I still consume a lot of content online about video games, even though I don't play as much as I used to. Now, if you're like me, you've probably noticed that over the years, video games have been replacing real-life gun names with these weird fake names.
Brother, what's that? What's that, brother?
And if you like guns, this probably annoys you. So why the change? Well, believe it or not, there are people out there who do not like guns. Now, the impetus for this video was that I stumbled upon another video that tried to explain why video games these days don't have real gun names in them. So in this video, I'm going to address some of his arguments, and then we're going to get to the real reason why video games dropped real gun names. The first thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers! So this person attributed legal reasons and the fear of being sued as the main reason why video games dropped real gun names, and he gave a couple of lawsuits as examples. The first one was between Bell Textron, an aerospace defense company, and EA Electronic Arts for use of the Huey and Cobra helicopters in Battlefield 3. In this instance, Electronic Arts actually filed the lawsuit first, but they eventually settled out of court before it went to trial. He then talked about another lawsuit where General Motors sued Activision for use of the Humvee in Call of Duty. Activision actually won this lawsuit decisively, with the judge dismissing General Motors' claims, so it seems this would provide some sort of precedent for video game companies to use things like Humvees and real military equipment in video games under a First Amendment argument. Now, of course, even though Activision won their case, getting sued and having legal battles is expensive and headache-inducing. So there's probably an argument to be made that these games, by not including real-life guns or brands, simply eliminate any possibility altogether of any sort of legal action. Sure. But then this doesn't really explain why there are plenty of guns in video games like the AK-47 or AKM that have no copyright or trademark on them whatsoever by nature of being made and named under communism by the Soviet military. This is even more absurd when you look at a game like Hunt Showdown, which is set in 1896, and the majority of firearms are much, much older than that, yet they still choose to omit real names in the majority of instances, opting for things like Spectre instead of Spencer for their Spencer repeating shotguns and rifles, or Sparks instead of Sharps for the Sharps rifle. Now, I did call out the original video's creator in the comments, and he admitted that he mainly wanted to use the video to talk about the cultural loss aspect of removing real-life gun names in video games, which this part of the video I largely agreed with. When they remade Battlefield 3, the Marines were using Blackhawks and Apaches instead of Cobras and Hueys, no doubt due to the lawsuit with Textron. And that, of course, does not represent the normal equipment the Marines use in real life, nor does it represent how Battlefield 3 originally shipped. I also agree that with certain characters like Revolver Ocelot of Metal Gear Solid, that the single-action army revolver that he uses is iconic to his character, and having it changed to the Tornado or whatever in Metal Gear Solid 5 was just kind of insulting and unnecessary, especially since you could have just used a military designation of M1873 or something, and especially since we're talking about a gun that went into service over 150 years ago. If I were making a game, I don't think there would be any fear of legal action from Colt, especially considering Colt can't even manage to stay in business for longer than 20 years at a time. And that's going to go into point number 2 as to why I don't buy this whole legal argument, because the two examples he gave, not one of them was about a gun company suing a video game company for using their gun name in a video game. One was a very rich, very powerful, very connected aerospace and defense corporation, and the other was General Motors. And that's important because people severely overestimate how big or powerful the gun industry actually is. So let's break down how much revenue these companies actually make, and presumably the more money that a company has, the more money they can spend to be embroiled in petty lawsuits like this. Bell Textron in 2024 made $13.7 billion. EA Electronic Arts in 2025 made $7.46 billion. General Motors in 2024 made $187.4 billion. Activision in 2022 made $7.53 billion. Now, remember, in a rare display of equal representation under the law, Activision actually won against General Motors in court despite being significantly smaller. So now let's compare this to the gun industry. So first off, data aggregator iBizWorld estimates that the entire gun industry made between $19.6 and $23.5 billion in revenue in 2025. So just to be clear, EA, Electronic Arts, alone makes about 1/3 of what the entire gun industry makes in revenue. And it's likely their profit margins are much greater due to the fact that manufacturing is a lot more expensive than making and shipping digital products. It's even more ridiculous if we square off individual gun companies versus individual video game companies. Ruger, 2024, $535 million. Well, 2023, $668 million. H&K, 2024, $301 million. Beretta, 2024, $1.7 billion. CC, Colt, 2024, $1 billion. Smith & Wesson, 2024, $535 million. So we have companies that are making a fraction of the revenue of what EA and Activision are, and presumably less profit due to the nature of their respective businesses. And yet I'm supposed to believe that these massive video game corporations are afraid of losing in court to one of these companies or even being sued in the first place, especially since the video game companies have a stronger First Amendment argument in court with Activision's win over General Motors. Remember, Textron and EA settled out of court, whereas an actual judge ruled in favor of Activision against GM. And it especially doesn't make sense since this is just straight up advertising for gun companies. It's not like I can go and buy an AH-1 Cobra because I saw it in Battlefield 3, and even a Humvee, if I were to buy one, would almost certainly be secondhand, so GM isn't seeing the profit there. It makes much more sense for companies like that, who are extremely rich and powerful defense contractors who are unlikely to receive any monetary benefit from having their products in a video game, to sue these video game companies than it does for a company like Glock, who can almost directly benefit from having their name in a game. You can draw a straight line between video game portrayals of guns and real-life purchases of guns in so many instances. I totally did not buy this Ithaca 37 trench gun because it was my favorite gun in Rising Storm 2 Vietnam. I would never have done that. That would be stupid. That would be silly. Just look at how many people are out there doing clone builds of video game guns, or how many people have bought, a Beretta 92 due to Resident Evil. I have a Smith & Wesson Model 39, and I bought a parts kit to eventually build into a Mark 22 Hush Puppy from Metal Gear Solid 3. I put a little motif on my custom 1911 that's sort of a callback to the 1911 from Metal Gear Solid 3. And make no mistake, this is a good thing across the board. This is advertising. If a company can't advertise, it can't sell its products. And the exchange of goods and services is literally the most basic form of economic stimulus as a whole. It's also another way for fans of a series to express themselves. And yes, it does get people, especially kids, interested in firearms, which is objectively a good thing. I would say video games were probably the #1 contributor to me being interested in guns as a kid, and I think that experience is pretty uniform for anyone my age that shares the same interest in firearms. I mean, look at this. I've got this Jane's Gun Recognition Guide, and on the first page it says, "To Jared from Dad, April 2010. So my balls hadn't even dropped, and I was flipping through this book, poring over its images, listening to every SIGINT codec call on repeat.
Wearing black face paint, huh?
My only regret is I wish I'd started shooting at this age. In the last 2 years of taking shooting seriously, my ability to shoot has skyrocketed. And I always wonder how good I'd be if I started back when I was 10 years old. And then you look at some of these kids who shoot the Olympic disciplines, especially the kids in like communist China or Korea, where as soon as they're big enough to get their little fingers around an air pistol, they're learning how to line up the sights and pull the trigger. They're going to the Olympic Games at like 18, 19, 20 years old. So getting your kids into guns and shooting should be a priority for any parent that shares that same interest. And I am lingering on this point because this gets at the true reason as to why video game companies no longer include real guns in their video games. They know that by doing so, it's essentially advertising for gun companies. Now, from a business standpoint, if I'm going to be advertising for someone, I would like for them to pay me. And in many circumstances, video game developers are actually doing the opposite and paying gun companies to use their names and models in-game. So from a business standpoint alone, it makes some sense to some degree, especially if you're going to portray something proprietary or something that still has active patents on it, or guns that are still being sold new, or using an actual brand name, to not want to pay licenses to these gun companies. Or maybe reverse the roles and have gun companies pay the game developers for what is essentially advertising. But again, this does not explain why video games exclude guns that have real-life names that are not copyrighted and not patented. And in the instance of some games like Hunt Showdown, guns whose manufacturers have been out of business for over a century, guns where there is absolutely no possibility of having an entity take legal action against you for including them. The real reason why video games no longer feature real guns is because many of the people at the decision-making level of some of the largest video game companies are anti-gun. That's it. They believe there is a moral or ethical reason to not advertise these firearms, and there's a particularly psychotic strain of modern political thought that specifically concerns the idea that under no circumstances should there ever be an instance where a gun is advertised or promoted towards minors, children, youths, etc. So this adorable little Cricket 22 long rifle that's sized appropriately for a kid with this adorable little cartoon mascot, that is pretty much the manifestation of pure evil to these people. And that's how you end up with the California state law about marketing guns towards kids and why you have to confirm your age now on every website that sells anything remotely gun-related. This whole idea about not advertising or marketing guns, and especially towards kids, is a very common viewpoint in not just the video game industry, but in the tech industry as a whole. And while video games are entertainment, the industry is much closer in culture and skill set to the tech industry than they are something like Hollywood or the music industry, both of which have also been targeted by the same sorts of people for causing or promoting violence, and in particular with kids. Well, video games have been getting the cause violence treatment for basically as long as they've been around, but around 2013 is when we started to see journalists target this particular relationship between gun companies and video games. The article that made the most noise seems to be the Eurogamer article from 2013 titled "How Video Games Fund Arms Manufacturers." And after that, it didn't take much convincing for these game companies to fold and stop including real-life gun names. I mean, there are so many articles from the 2013 to 2019 time frame about this. I found like 10 articles within 2 minutes of a Google search. This particular article from this particularly modern male kind of cracked me up. Adam Clare says,
"I'm trying to remember if I've paid for a game with realistically branded guns in it. If I have, then I have given money to the arms industry, and I don't like that.
If you've paid taxes in the last 6,000 years, you've done more to fund the arms industry and killing than buying Call of Duty Modern Warfare." Ever has. And when you give away money to the government, we're talking about funding real killing machines like Lockheed drones designed specifically to lock onto and explode Palestinian children. Thankfully, I read a little further in the article and discovered why this guy is so... But these are the guys that work for the video game industry. These are their thought leaders. These are why this guy is so... But these are the guys... Thankfully, I read a little further in the article and discovered why this guy is so... But these are the guys that work for the video game industry. These are their thought leaders. These are their intellectuals. These are the guys that are going to go to industry events, get up on stage, and give their little presentations about game design and influence game design for the next 10 or 12 years. And at the end of the day, they're tech industry people. And we all know how these tech companies and tech industry people are with guns. Look at pretty much every product you interact with online. Facebook, YouTube, Google, PayPal, Zelle, Venmo. Every single one of these apps or products online have some kind of anti-gun policy or policies, and in particular some kind of stipulation against the sale and or advertisement of firearms. They want the gun industry to die. Again, if the company can't advertise, a company can't sell. If the company can't sell, it goes out of business. In YouTube's case, you can't even promote a website or store that sells firearm accessories, like not just firearms, but firearms accessories in general, which is ridiculous because there are a lot of camera supply websites that sell things like camera lenses and cameras. And guess what? Carl Zeiss not only makes camera lenses, they make rifle scopes, and that same website sells rifle scopes. That policy from YouTube eliminates basically 99% of the possible sponsorships for a gun YouTuber. So if you have a favorite gun YouTuber, you should consider supporting them directly with a YouTube membership or a Patreon subscription. So anyways, when these anti-gun journalists blew the whistle that video game companies were sometimes paying gun companies to use their current production guns in their games with their real names and likeness, well, the video game industry quickly distanced themselves as far as possible from gun companies because, of course, all of these video game devs exist in this big anti-gun echo chamber with the rest of the tech industry, and no one wants to be made a pariah. I mean, you can just look at the top American video game publishers and developers and see pretty much all of them are from California, the Seattle, Washington area, New York City, not areas or populations well known for their supportive stance on Second Amendment rights. There are also a ton of video game developers and publishers from Europe, the United Kingdom, Japan, etc., places of the world that just don't place the same level of importance on firearm ownership or individualism the way that we do here in the United States. So Hideo Kojima was kind of an early adopter by excluding real-life firearms in Metal Gear Solid 5. That game released in, I believe, 2014 and 2015, and that Eurogamer article was published in 2013 when Metal Gear Solid 5 was still in development. And I don't remember where I heard it, but I believe Kojima specifically said the decision to not use real guns was due to the anti-war, anti-militarist, anti-weapon themes of Metal Gear Solid 5. And so it would have been hypocritical of him or antithetical to essentially advertise for these gun companies. But Metal Gear Solid 5 was not the titan of industry that something like Battlefield or Call of Duty is. I would say the turning point for the games industry was when Modern Warfare 2019 released. That game showed the industry that you could put these stupid names on guns, and it turns out people will still buy it to the tune of over $1 billion. And once they showed that, it was super easy to make the case for the rest of the games industry because game devs would no longer be paying gun companies, which translates to an instant savings. They don't potentially open themselves up to legal struggles, although unlikely with the gun companies themselves, there may be a future legal angle with some of the state laws like what California has regarding advertising guns to children. Also, the portion of the population that cares about this enough to not buy the game over it are so small and insignificant to companies like EA and Activision that it really doesn't affect their bottom line. I mean, honestly, the number of people interested in guns in general is pretty small to begin with, and that's pretty much why the gun industry is so small. But most important of all to these people is they can finally rid themselves of this great moral evil of promoting gun manufacturers and the evil arms industry, and that's what this is all about. So the real reason we don't have real guns in video games anymore is directly a result of modern political thought and ideology, unfortunately. These people in tech and the games industry pretty much uniformly want to see guns go away in real life. And so it makes sense for them to not want to support the gun industry directly or indirectly. And they will try to assist in the destruction of the gun industry in any way possible. And one of those ways is sanitizing their media to downplay guns, getting rid of real guns, even if it means making a lesser, less believable, less authentic, more cartoonish end product. It sucks, but you know what? Video games suck these days anyways. So stop buying them and stop supporting these freaks from California. You should buy your guns and get your games for free, or just play RuneScape. In any case, thank you all for watching. Thank you especially to my channel members and Patreon supporters for supporting the channel directly. You can become a channel member or a Patreon supporter by clicking the relevant links on screen with the join button down below. Thank you all for watching and have a great day.
Imagine this, 100 grown men, no armor, no weapons, thrown into an arena with a fully grown silverback gorilla. Who walks out? It sounds like a ridiculous internet thought
The
experiment.
gorilla has the chance?
100 grown men is, but out. It sounds like a ridiculous internet thought experiment, and it totally is. But behind the absurdity lies a ton of legitimately interesting questions about strength and the brutal limits of biology. I've seen dozens of people talk about this fight, mostly being bros who don't offer any actual knowledge to the discussion.
A gorilla all day. Every tooth is like this big, bro. No. Every tooth is like this big.
So we'll discuss the anatomy that makes them so strong and the actual accounts of gorillas attacking humans and what resulted. Just how powerful is a gorilla, really? Is there any realistic way that 100 unarmed humans could survive, or let alone win? And how did ancient humans fare when coming across Gigantopithecus and other giant primates? Let's find out today on this episode of Northo 2. Or let alone win? And how any realistic way that 100 unarmed humans could survive, or let alone win? And how did ancient humans fare when coming across Gigantopithecus and other giant primates? Let's find out today on this episode of Northo 2. This trend appeared on the internet only last week with thousands of hilarious posts about how screwed the first people to fight the gorilla would be. I found this one particularly funny. But these humorous posts led to actual discussions about how such a fight would go down. The general theme was half of the people thinking gorillas were some kind of superhuman King Kong creatures, and the other half pointing out how capable 100 people would be. But here on Northo 2, we use serious scientific research to evaluate questions about human evolution. And it is time this hypothetical fight receives some serious thought. First, let's get the facts straight about gorillas. The AI photos that have been going around show gorillas to be massive, like 10 feet tall and over 2,000 pounds probably. Gorillas aren't nearly this size. The eastern lowland gorilla is the largest species. Males weigh between 330 to 460 pounds and stand around 5'11". The largest wild gorilla ever recorded was 589 pounds and 6 feet tall. That is absolutely massive, but still nowhere near the size of these damn AI images. What is even more impressive about gorillas is how lean they can be while being this massive. Wild gorillas carry only about 5 to 15% body fat, with most estimates on the leaner side. For perspective, after months of cutting weight, bodybuilders try to get between 4 to 8% body fat for a competition. In contrast, gorillas stay this lean year-round. So while a gorilla is already massive, they are also leaner than most professional fighters. With so much lean muscle, how strong are gorillas really? Gorillas have monstrous upper body strength, and their chest is particularly strong. It is estimated that they could bench press over 4,000 pounds. That is over 20 times more than the average lifter. Their pulling strength is also extremely impressive. The fact that a gorilla can hold its entire body with one arm while climbing shows incredible functional strength. But with both arms, they can pull up to 1,800 pounds. This is incredible when considering the average man can only pull around 100 pounds, meaning a gorilla can pull 12 times more weight than the average man. Though gorillas are far stronger in their upper body than us, our legs are actually quite developed in comparison. There are no direct studies on what they could squat, but a reasonable estimate is 1,100 pounds, which is slightly higher than the heaviest that a human has ever squatted. But the average male can only squat about 220 pounds, making the gorilla's legs 4 to 5 times stronger than the average male. So yeah, clearly gorillas are way stronger than the average man. But what about strong men? You know, the massive guy.
Did you know that in one story, Batman gained Superman's powers and discovered just how much he could...
Fucking AI.
Yeah, I just remembered fellow who played Spider-Man.
Yeah.
I don't know
Ortiz. He passed away young.
Who?
His last name is something either Ortiz or Cortez.
Batman? Or
No,
Superman?
Spider-Man. That's Peter Parker, Spider-Man. Spider-Man Cortez. But
I don't know what you're referring to.
the guy who played Spider-Man.
Yeah, which? All
Yeah.
the people that played Spider-Man. I don't know why it does that.
Well, I know he was Spider-Man. Because I think he
Else about
took,
his name, perhaps?
I think he might have took his place.
Tom Holland's the most recent Spider-Man.
Okay, well, I'll look tomorrow.
I don't know what you Alexis Ortega.
God, that was like really close, huh? Did he play Spider-Man?
He was a voice actor in Latin America.
I read that he played.
Yes, he was a voice actor of Spider-Man in Latin America.
Okay.
Played.
For the first time in Gotham's history, they haven't received a single 911 call. When Batman hears this, he replies that he's still not finished, since he's about to stop all the crime in the world. And the benefits of a healthy black market. Batman first heads to Santa Prisca Island, where a group of villains are celebrating their victories. However, when Batman arrives,
the same.